We are glad to welcome everyone who joins us here for the discussion of the book 50 Prominent Women who changed the world. And we have with us Ms. Yaroslava Johnson and also Mr. Dmytro Vortman, who is the historian and the topographist. He is going to join us as soon as possible. Ms. Lilia, the floor is yours. Well, thank you for your introduction. We wanted to share with you in more detail the description, or the information rather, about the book that was very recently published with the purpose of mobilizing, so to say, the young ladies for the professions that are not considered typically female professions, and to inform them better about the opportunities here in Ukraine. Speaking about the writers, the prominent people in the field of literature, in the area of literature, more than 90% are men. Here in Ukraine, the recent figure was only 2% female writers. So we wanted to shed some light on the possibilities and opportunities that are open for the young women to work in this area. The work on the book started in September 2017, and in 8 months, 7.5 months rather, we have a book that was jointly, we can say so, jointly written by about 100 authors, and here in Ukraine we had also a designer, a painter who prepared the drawings made the drawings for the book. Therefore, we would now like to focus on the stereotypes that we consider to be typical, that surround this notion of female or non-female professions, occupations, professional occupations. Ms. Johnson, could you please tell us why that work was so important for you, and have you in fact encountered any stereotypes in your work? Thank you, Ms. Lilia. Our foundation decided to support the publication of this book because we considered it a logical extension, so to say, of the work of our foundation, which has as one of the important directions of this work, the support of and protection of the rights of women. Therefore, we have been encouraging not only the young women, but also women of all ages, to work in the literary, in the field of literature. Therefore, this book, we considered that this book about 50 women, and this book published in Ukrainian, could be a good illustration, could be a good example of what and how can women attain very good results. And so I considered it my duty to help those young aspiring women to attain good results. I would also like to add that the National Democratic Institute of the United States supported the publication of this book, as well as the Embassy of the Kingdom of Sweden in Ukraine. Now I would like to ask our panelist, what was your interest in this book? Because we know that some people, having learned about this book, the very topic of this book, like life-changing achievements, they were wondering why only women were included into that book. Well, thank you for your question. Good morning, everybody. The indeed National Democratic Institute, both here and in the other countries where we work, pay a lot of attention to the participation of the women who participate, take active part in political life, in social life, and therefore when the very concept of this project was presented to us, we understood that we needed to support, to sustain this project, so that Ukrainians, so that also to facilitate the shedding of these, terrible stereotypes that are still present in Ukrainian society, among the members of the Ukrainian society, with regard to women. And we also considered it to be a contribution to the description of our history, of our culture, and as far as the stereotypes are concerned, we sometimes do not even imagine how damaging these stereotypes could be, even at a day-to-day life level. As a young mother, I know it only too well what it takes sometimes to, to advocate, to prove the rights to certain, things in life in this country. Therefore, these stereotypes, they accompany us in our young years and then throughout our whole lives. Therefore, I would recommend the following to the young ladies. Never mind the fact that the women in our society are the larger part of it. They constitute more than 50% of the population, in fact. They still are very well, very poorly, very little, they have very little knowledge about their rights, about their entitlements. There were three women politicians, who contributed to our book. The MP, Ms. Suslova, the Deputy Prime Minister, Ms. Tsintsadze, and I am very grateful for their contribution to this book, because they shared their knowledge about how not only to overcome the stereotypes, but also overcome the institutional barriers that exist in our country to the implementation, to the realization of the rights of women. Therefore, I think that this was very good, very righteous, if you want, for our modern society, a project, and we are very proud to have contributed to it and prove also that young women in this country are also capable of a lot of things. I would like to add from my side that when the book was being prepared, and later when it was the book was published, my daughter and the younger her younger girlfriend, they were discussing the characters of the book. They were comparing them and highlighting their various good deeds, and so I would like to use this opportunity to thank everybody who contributed to this book, and speaking about specifically the illustrations to this book, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Beata Kuruk, who was an illustrator who made the drawings for this book. And she basically shaped out, so to say, the main character, if you want, of a book. Thank you, and I would like to say that I'm going to speak Russian because my Ukrainian is yet far from perfect. Because since I got acquainted with the future authors and creators of this book, yet before this project was done, I was asked by a friend of mine, by Mr. Ilya, whether I would like to make drawings to illustrate this book. And specifically, I was asked to make the drawings to the part of the book, to the chapter of the book dedicated to Oksana Masters, whose Ukrainian last name is Bondarchuk, and she was born soon after Chernobyl nuclear accident, and she got some acute medical conditions with, calcium lacking in her bones, and her hands were disfigured. Therefore, she was soon after birth abandoned by her parents. But then, in the life of that young girl, an American woman appeared, a certain Miss Masters. And having passed through all these circles of the bureaucratic hell here in Ukraine, she somehow managed to adopt that girl, and she practically, Miss Masters, dedicated all her life to the rehabilitation of that girl. And unfortunately, there were one of her legs had to be amputated, of that young girl, and then the second leg. And there was the issue of how to restore the functionality to the body of that girl, Oksana. And the American doctors did their best, and she later on engaged even in rowing, sports rowing, kayaking. So Oksana Bondarchuk, who is now also Oksana Masters, is a member of the U.S. Paralympic team, and a winner of a number of silver and gold Paralympic medals. And I would like to add that at the last Paralympic Games, she was awarded a gold medal. So together with her coach, rather not coach, but teammate, who was an American serviceman in Afghanistan and who lost one of his limbs there, he also partnered with Oksana in this boat rowing trainings. And so they became partners. Yeah, I would like to highlight the fact that it was not so easy to describe such a complicated life as that of Oksana Bondarchuk. Yes, it was a challenge. Indeed, it was a challenge, and I was also driven, for example, in working on that book and on these illustrations, I was driven by the idea that I needed to show that even these huge, that huge bodily harm that she sustained was not an insuperable barrier obstacle to, still functional life. And there was also a discussion with Ilya, the friend of mine who introduced me to that project. He told me that let us Now, let us draw her as she could be in, under normal conditions. If she didn't have those, terrible losses of her limbs, let's draw her standing on the skis, and I objected. I said that it would not be true to life, because usually those people who do not have legs, have their legs amputated, they usually stand on, they are skiing, indeed they do, but as standing on their knees. I would also like to add that I saw some of the videos of the American Paralympic team videos, and I noticed that they had also a slogan, pain and elegance, which means that although they all live through a lot of pain, they continue trying to be elegant, look elegant. And today, women, more and more women, having read our book, they join in our, so to say, movement towards the implementation, towards the attainment of higher life goals. Now, Mr. Dmytro Vortman, who is the editor of our book, he has joined us. We have had battles with him, so to say, with regard to many of the characters of that book. Can you please tell us on how you worked on this project, and what was more difficult for you? The most difficult for you, the most difficult part of this project? Probably, well, whether it was, the book was about women or not, or somebody else is the subject, so to say, of the book, but the very format of the book was a difficulty. Because I understood that the topic of the book requested some simplification in as far as my previous job was editing, academic texts written by the scientists. Therefore, that was for me this specificity, so to say, was some posed not a difficulty, but that was a special feature of my work on that project. Do you have any characters that you might describe, any characters in this book that you might describe as those whom you liked most? Well, I can say that if not the most liked, but at least about 60% of the women about whom I read working on this project, I read about them for the first time. I had never heard about them before. So, therefore, this, my attitude generally was with great empathy towards all the characters of the book. What I also wanted to say that when we started working on the book, the majority of the characters indeed were very little known. So we felt it our task to, present them to the public at large. and we are very happy that thanks to our partners this book is printed, the circulation is quite large, and it will be supplied to the libraries, and the young women, young girls would be able to take this book, read it, and get inspired. I hope that this book could be a book that people might like to read more than once, and get better vision of professional occupations that are available to them. And it seems to me personally that the stereotypes we have at least by some part of the women are being fought against. And here I would like to ask Ms. Olena and Ms. Yaroslava, has the situation with regard to the attitude towards women in our society changed? Has it changed? Well, I have been working here for the last 25 years, and so when I came to the Soviet Union first, my impression was that women's roles professionally have been rather strictly fixed. Like women were present in the educational sphere, in the sphere of healthcare. Otherwise, women's roles were limited to housekeeping and similar things, and simpler jobs. But let me also tell you that women whom I met, for example, who worked in healthcare, they were much more creative than men. Their male colleagues, for example, they're probably more aware of the laws and their functions and so on, but they were not constructive and creative enough in, performing these functions. Therefore, I'm sure that women, and this book shows that women can do things on their own. They can do them creatively. And I hope that in conjunction with the other programs where we have a lot of young women involved, I hope that this will contribute to their efforts, because I admire these young women who want to do something for their country. Thank you, Ms. Yaroslava. I was in the legal profession, although I had been working as a marketing specialist, not a lawyer exactly, but I was pleased to see the professionals, female professionals, because it had been before practically male-dominated occupation. Well, I sometimes seem to some people an incorrigible optimist, but I hope that the changes that have been occurring in Ukrainian society recently, they are irreversible, and according to the polls that, for example, the National Democratic Institute is doing, I hope that the participation of the women in political decision-making process, more than 50% of our respondents said that both men and women should be equally involved in political life. 52% of the respondents indicated that. Then, Lilia, you've also mentioned our joint project, one common or joint work or cause for the women. There was a research done in the course of that project that has shown that a few hundred professions were professional occupations were not considered open to women as being dangerous or hazardous, and were only available to men. Therefore, the recent legislation has changed so that more of these professions were open were made accessible to the women. Therefore, the changes occur, and this book is a wonderful instrument for both girls and boys to look through the information in this book and understand, get clearer idea that all professional venues, practically all of them, are open, are accessible to them. Well, thank you. This only is a beginning of the project, and as we have been working on this, in this realm of women's rights for a rather short time yet, I would like to underline that we are not going to limit our efforts to only the publication of this book, because even when we started, to compile a list of the characters for that book, we wanted to, so to say, to shortlist 100 people, then to choose 50 of them as the best characters. And when we started working and clearing our ideas about what women to choose as the main characters of this book, we have discovered it for ourselves that there are thousands of very good examples of professional successes of women in this country. Therefore, there was also an idea to show not only the opportunities, but also not only the achievements, but also the opportunities, unrealized opportunities of the women, unattained things that she could have done but didn't do. But that certainly is a joke. We want to highlight more than anything else that women's role should not be limited to housekeeping, to the kitchen, so to say, and to looking after the children. Women are capable of much, much more. And tomorrow at 11 a.m., everybody can visit the Ukrainian Museum of History of Ukraine. There will be an exhibition that is going to last for at least a month. We are going to make a number of presentations about Ukraine. And on the 12th of this month, we are going to make a presentation of our book in Lvov, and then here in Kiev at Art or Mistetsky Arsenal, it's called in Ukrainian, cultural establishment. Maybe someone else would like to add anything? Any questions? Yes, if you permit me. Well, rural areas, as we know, are the areas where all the achievements arrive only too late sometimes. And as we all know, women living there, they practically consider, domestic violence, for example, as a norm of life. How then could this book be, shared with rural audiences? Do you plan any, are you planning any parts of your campaign for the rural areas? Because there probably that area is the book where that book is most needed. Well, yes, thank you for your question, because I have forgotten to tell you that we are going to present these books to the libraries in the rural schools, because we certainly understand that in rural areas we still are. We are aware that in the rural areas these traditions and these stereotypes are most persistent. I'm not going to say that we will be able to organize presentations in many schools, but still Skype presentation, the broadcasting of these presentations via Skype are available. And the school libraries. So as many girls we are going to target as possible. Well, thank you very much. If there are no more questions from the audience, then everybody, thank you for your participation, and we